Well, returning to one of our top stories, and President Trump has signed an executive order extending the U.S. tariff truce with China for another 90 days. The extension will ease worries of a renewed tariff war that threatens to choke off trade between the world's two largest economies.
We've been dealing very nicely with China, as you probably have heard. They have tremendous tariffs that they're paying to the United States of America. The relationship is very good with President Xi and myself.
Well, joining us for more is Yu Ji, Senior Research Fellow on China in the Asia-Pacific Program at Chatham House. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, when you look at the truce deadline and the fact that it was extended to November 10th, is this a good sign? Like, what does Donald Trump want from China right now?
Well, Francine, nice to see you here. What Donald Trump wanted with China, obviously, they want to have a grand bargain with Beijing to be able to justify that Donald Trump has dealt with the trade issue quite successfully as what he promised during the presidential election, I think, firstly. Now, secondly, I think China as a market is really large enough for the United States and also for U.S. companies. So I doubt any U.S. companies would be willing to give up. So I think that's the second reason. Now, I think third reason is also politically. Donald Trump wants to show that he is able to manage probably the most consequential bilateral relationship, which is U.S.-China relations. But all this hung into the moment that whether he's able to put up a meeting with Xi Jinping or not later in the year.
So, Xi, when you look at exactly what he needs, there was a little bit of a spanner in the works. Certainly yesterday when we heard that AMD and NVIDIA could pay 15% back to Donald Trump. And we know that he's looking for money also to pay for the big, beautiful bill. I mean, is this more of a money arrangement? So will he be softer on China if he understands that he can get money back from U.S. companies?
Well, it's a kind of typical Donald Trump mentality. He's willing to make a deals and try to find some money somewhere to offset for something else. And that actually played perfectly for China's interest at the same time. That is to say, let's talk about money, but not national security. But while we're talking about the chips and semiconductors in here, essentially, it's about the security risk. But equally, I think really to what extent, how much China is really willing to buy the H20 NVIDIA chips, that's another entire different question. I mean, earlier this month, the Chinese authority already get in touch with NVIDIA talking about the possible vulnerabilities and backdoor security risks. So I think the Chinese also have their own problems with this deal by itself.
Where do you see the tariffs actually ending up?
Well, I think judging from the pattern that Beijing is doing right now, this seems Beijing taking a stalling negotiation approach. That is to say, delay the deadline as much as possible, which would be able to buy some time for China's own domestic economic rebalancing. And really judging from the trade number, the export number we have seen in July so far, that the Chinese export actually grew 7.2%. So in a way, that does not really necessarily fit into the story that without the United States, that China's export won't grow. So I think really what Beijing is looking at is firstly looking at the alternative market that is able to offset the losses from US and European market, but secondly, also rebalancing its economy.
Give me a sense of actually how China could retaliate. I don't know whether you consider, they basically said that especially for companies, well, not companies, but actually government officials, it's better if they don't use this H20 processors from NVIDIA. Is that retaliation, or will they just be much stronger on rare earths? This is the stuff that, the West really needs.
Well, I think it's both ways. So judging from all the readouts so far, I think both sides has not really mentioned where does the critical mineral export control Beijing is willing to loosen or not. We haven't seen that. So I think it's very firm. That's to say, Beijing will continue to play a very hard-nosed approach regarding the export control over critical minerals. So that won't change. Now, secondly, I think Beijing is now drum up this drive of indigenous innovation, which is to say that hoping to be able to use domestic grown semiconductors that would enable and strengthen China's technology supply chain. So NVIDIA or not, perhaps it's not really the best option for Beijing if it is want to build up a semiconductor supply chain within the country by itself.
Xi, what does it mean for example, soybeans? We know that Donald Trump on social media was really wanted China to quadruple U.S. soybean buying. But would they, if they have Brazil, who's also a partner? We know that President Lula went to see President Xi.
Yeah, I think the two men just had a conversation earlier. Let's put it this way. I think that China today is very different from the first Donald Trump terms, that in terms of negotiation. In the past, Beijing was more inclined to have quick trade deals with the United States. However, I think given at the stage where we are now, and China has a very different toolboxes to be able to use. So I think it's less likely that Beijing is willing to agree to purchasing extra soybeans, which Beijing can do so if they decided they want to make some kind of trade-off with the United States. But I think so far, Beijing's mood seems to be quite muted when it comes to the discussion of purchasing extra agricultural products. But obviously, that is perhaps the easiest bargain that Beijing is willing to make to offer.
Do you think we'll get a meeting between Donald Trump and President Xi, face to face?
Well, I think my watch point would be to see whether the Chinese foreign minister will be able to visit Washington, to visit the White House by late September during the UN General Assembly. So if that has been agreed, and that means there's a likely summit happen between Xi and Trump. So I think that's the watch point would be late September.
Xi, I mean, I know it's something that we've also been trying to talk about with the panel. Is President Trump now softer on China than the rest of his cabinet?
Well, I don't think he's really soft on China. What he's really want to do is he wants to get the trade issues sorted, which he considers as his only single biggest priority, firstly. I think secondly, there's also the sense that he wants to show himself as being a great leader that is able to communicate with one of the world's second largest economy and also be able to communicate with leaders from all sides. So that is something Donald Trump is looking at optics. That is like a statement, and he's willing to talk to everybody. So that is what he's aiming at. But I think this might change given the midterm election is taking place. We're probably going to see more turmoil on U.S.-China relations in the next year, but not necessarily this year, really judging from what is happening right now on the trade front, but also on this potential summit between Xi and Donald Trump.
Yuji, thanks so much for joining us. That was a senior research fellow on China at Chatham House. Coming up, we talk energy, given presidents, of course,